And now we will feature a breakout session with Head of Travel US at Criteo, Jason Glas, and Client Partner Travel EMEA at Criteo, Pauline Rigaudy, in conversation with Skift's editorial strategist, Darren Free.
Hey everyone, welcome to our breakout session. Thank you. Grab a snack. It's lunchtime. Let's do this. Today's session is about how personalized messaging is driving loyalty, presented by our partner at Criteo. Loyalty is a huge topic. We've talked a lot about it already in some of these sessions. As brands want to stay top of mind, even when people aren't traveling, loyalty really is about, it's not just about accumulating points as part of a traditional loyalty program. It's really more about that one-to-one messaging. And I should add relevant one-to-one messaging. Some of the brands that are doing this best are really good at just knowing what customers need at any given moment and then adapting their offers and messages to whatever channels are being engaged with. It's really about picking up conversations with customers where they left off. And as we all know, at this moment during COVID-19, when all travelers are more hesitant to buy, travel brands need to be willing to experiment with how they use real-time intent data. So this raises a few questions. What changes in consumer behavior do we need to be aware of? How can travel brands rethink their marketing strategies? And really, what does the future of travel advertising even look like? So to help us answer these questions, we've got Jason Glas and Pauline Rigaudy with us from Criteo. Jason heads up US travel and Pauline covers travel in Europe. So Jason and Pauline, welcome.
Hey, Darren, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Darren.
Before we start, just a reminder for attendees to please feel free to submit questions in the chat and we'll get to as many as possible by the end of the session. So Jason, why don't you kick us off? Can you just share a little bit of background on Criteo and its role in the travel industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So Criteo is we're a full stack performance marketing platform that's built to help our advertisers reach consumers throughout the open internet. And in this case, we're going to talk about our travel vertical, which we support travel brands, OTAs, meta search sites, in some cases tourism boards, really helping them reach their online marketing objectives. Our company was founded on the basis of AI and machine learning, with the idea being to produce the most relevant ads at the right place at the right time. So we're really, user focused, right? Not on the group, but on the individual. And I think, for travel, this is really, really important because, it involves gathering different intent signals throughout a customer's planning journey, understanding, these signals through our partners, but also the publishers that we work with, and really helping, interpret those signals into predictive outcomes in advertising.
So in terms of recovery, what role can advertising and advertising technology play as the industry looks toward recovery?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, just, being a conduit for what brands are doing right now in the space to evolve. Almost every brand that you'll hear from, through the forum and that you talk to have done something different, have sort of strayed from the norm to innovate around this time. And I think, being able to take that amazing work that companies are doing and putting that into an advertising environment is something that we strive to do. So we really want to be an extension of the on-site or of the brand experience itself. I think another, key point right now too is to educate consumers. Advertising is a perfect way to get a one-to-one message to someone who maybe is, sort of considering traveling, but they haven't fully committed, might be a little scared about, what it is they're going to experience when they get there. And so I think that, advertising right now can be very informational in that regard to help people feel comfortable when they're going through a booking experience.
So let's take a moment and talk a little bit about consumer booking behavior in response to COVID-19 travel shutdowns. Pauline, can you talk about what you've seen in consumer booking behavior over the past few months?
Yeah, sure. Well, one is sadly booking less trips. Of course, lockdown measures, quarantine, lots of jobs have made it a lot more difficult, for people to travel. I myself know I've booked a lot less trips in 2020 than I did in 2019. However, as we know, travel isn't dead. People still want to travel, especially now that we've all spent so much time working like indoors and staying indoors, So we know humans are adaptable, and we just adapt to this new normal. But in terms of booking behaviors, of course, one that we've seen is very much this shift to local and regional travels, of course. With quarantine and lockdowns, people have definitely preferred to take their car and to explore their own country, their own state. Vacational rental companies, such as Vrbo and Airbnb, have definitely been able to take advantage of this rise in domestic staycations, particularly in these rural locations, which is another trend that we've been really seeing, of course, and this increased demand for countryside retreat. And less, of these city breaks, cities are not so attractive anymore with the, COVID measures in place. You can't really do the usual things that you used to do when you used to visit these cities, like even go out. But most importantly, you can't socially distance yourself so much. But another trend I'd like to point out is kind of this move to last minute booking. So with the situation kind of constantly changing, it's so difficult to plan where you're going to be going and what you're going to do. So for instance, in the UK, we have this list of countries where you have to do a 2 weeks quarantine where you come back to the country, and that's always constantly changing. So that means that if you want to travel somewhere, you need to be spontaneous and you need to make a quick decision. And that means that, for travel brands, more than ever, they need, their site to be user friendly, and they need to provide an easy booking experience.
Mm-hmm. So Jason, let's just take a step back and take a look at Criteo one more time. If you can just give us an example of, how, taking a look at these, considering these booking behaviors, and then, connecting that with loyalty, and how does Criteo incorporate loyalty within its partners' programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a few things come to mind, and I'll say, first and foremost, being able to ingest loyalty data into a marketing program. So having the partnerships in place with different audience providers, being able to plug in directly in some cases with an advertiser's APIs that they possess, and receiving that information in real time, and I think we've seen success with putting this information to use for bidding, being able to manipulate a bid amount based on loyalty tier or what we think is the most valuable for a customer, and working with them to understand, what at that point in time their strategy is to reach users. Messaging is another one. You don't want to message everyone in the same way. So how can we take that information and then use it in a way that lets us segment users and serve them a more one-to-one message, more personalized message for them. And then I think lastly too, and this is probably the most challenging, and we could have a whole session on this, is measurement, right? I think we're accustomed to looking at marketing programs from the lens of a post-click, conversion or KPIs that are much more in the short term. And I think when it comes to loyalty, and you'll probably hear this in other topics today too, but lifetime value is something that you really have to consider. And, there really isn't a tried and true method of what does that really mean. So, it's important to kind of keep those short-term metrics first and foremost as you're optimizing marketing channels, but you also want to keep an eye to some of the long-term behaviors that you might see out of those users who are in your loyalty program.
So Jason, I think you have a case study to share with us, just to bring up on screen, to kind of illustrate some of these points. Can you talk through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we put together a case study on something we did back in Q1 with the hope of reintroducing loyalty users to Caribbean destinations, to vacations that were beach friendly, and helping them understand what options there were. And I think first off, onboarded an audience list, matched that against Criteo's identity graph, which is our first party user graph, where we can build an audience from a CRM file or a CDP list that someone has. And then serving them a tailored message. And these were people who had been to the Caribbean in the past, but hadn't been back to the site in the last year. So, we really wanted to get in front of them and remind them of, these experiences of the past. We chose to do video content for that program. So you can see a few examples. Those are actually mock brand examples in there, if anybody's wondering, but just to give you a little visual. And the goal was to really just drive activity back to these curated vacation pages that the brand had put together.
Cool. I want to shift and talk with Pauline before it's bedtime in London. Pauline is joining us from London today.
Not yet, though.
Not yet. It's not bedtime yet. You had a travel in Europe, so I'm wondering, what have you learned from consumer behavior and recovery in Europe, and how can that inform, what we do here in the Americas as we recover, in a different way with different sets of lockdowns, et cetera?
Well, I think with the situation constantly changing, the most important thing I've learned is really to stay agile. So here in the UK, the lockdown started kind of end of March, and the regulations kind of loosened beginning of July. However, right now what we're seeing is that these regulations are being tightened again. So just today they've announced that pubs and restaurants could only be open until 10 p.m. and there's going to be more restrictions, and many are fearing this kind of second wave. So, travel companies will need to be able to adapt to this new environment where the travelers are faced with a lot of restrictions, and these are changing all the time. But we know that there's always going to be that demand to travel. But I think it needs even more that using real-time data is key to make the best informed decision. You can't look at historic data because we're in a completely environment to last year. So for instance, at Criteo, what we've done to kind of help our partners is that we've provided some real-time reports showing kind of trends in bookings across different countries and actually also US states. So we can help to show them where they can best invest their marketing budgets or decrease them or relaunch campaigns just to maximize the returns on investments. Another thing I advise to is also to continue using kind of an A/B testing framework to optimize, campaign setups, creatives, and also bidding algorithms to improve your ROI. This is a really, really difficult period for this industry, and it's absolutely crucial not to waste any money and make sure you're spending the marketing budgets in the most efficient ways. And, at Criteo, we're always working on kind of fine-tuning our bidding algorithms. And, a big focus for us has been on incrementality and how we can best optimize campaigns to drive incremental returns.
Jason, what about you in the US? Have you seen any trends that have caught your eye lately?
Yeah, I think I'll share a couple. I think the first one I thought was interesting, and I'll just say this too, even after this session, if anybody has ideas or anything with regards to travel they'd like for us to explore further, please shoot Pauline or I a message either through the Skift platform or on LinkedIn, because we love to geek out and talk about data. Criteo is a big data company in essence.
Yep.
So, just thinking about trends from sort of before and post, the peak of coronavirus, some repeat booking trends caught my eye. So out of the users who we looked at bookings that took place in January and February and compared it to the last 2 months. And we actually saw that 13% of the bookings seen through our system in January and February, 13% of those users had returned to travel sites in the past 2 months, which I thought was really interesting. So what that tells me is kind of two things, right? First off, that's still a large percentage of people who have booked as recently as this year haven't yet really started to return to travel. So I think there's an opportunity to create a strategy and a messaging approach that speaks to them. And then secondly, it's that, it's kind of important to kind of keep an eye on stats like this to always sort of check yourself and make sure that you're using ideas and strategies that will help people in real time, depending on what the market is showing.
So one more question before we get to the audience questions. I wanted to ask Pauline, what do you see are the main factors driving loyalty right now?
So I think that the factors that are driving loyalty are still really similar to what they were pre-COVID. So back in 2019, we conducted a global survey to better understand the main factors that were driving the consumers to book again with certain providers. So we asked 13,000 consumers about their traveling habits across 13 different countries. And whether it was an airline, a hotel, or OTA, or even metasearch, the most two important factors that our respondents cited were user friendliness and force of habits. And that came above price and loyalty programs. So this tells us that actually providing, a great customer experience is, which includes factor like helpful customer service and easy to navigate like kind of website and app, user-friendly kind of booking path are all super key. And I believe that this is even more important during this current situation. With all the changes of policies, of lockdown measures, it's super tough to plan your trip in advance because, maybe all the places you want to travel to will be all shut when you get to them and you just have to cancel kind of your trip, right? So when you do take the risk, you don't really want to spend so much time kind of researching all the different websites to get a different deal. What you do is that you go to the provider that you trust the most. And so, for instance, two of my girlfriends and I, we wanted to go on holiday in September, and we'd booked France. We were going to go to Biarritz, and unfortunately, we had to cancel our trip because France was put on the quarantine list. But we were committed, and we were looking every day which countries can we travel to, and which are not going to be put on the quarantine list for the UK. And we saw Italy, so we traveled to Puglia. Actually,
you poor thing. You had to settle for Italy. I feel so bad for you.
in the south of Italy. And, we booked it just 2 days before. So I had 2 days to book the flights, accommodation, everything. And, and in that amount of time, I went back to the websites that I found most easy to use and which I trusted the most.
That's great. I wish I could go to Italy right now, but I'm in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan. Almost the same. I'm having espresso. Hey, Jason, let's take some audience questions for both of you. One of them is directed to Jason. We just have about 5 minutes left, so just doing a time check. But Jason, how does Criteo's work relate? How does it help most large companies drive traffic? It's a question from one of our audience members.
How does our work, or what are we doing to help companies drive traffic?
Yeah, exactly. How does it help most of large? Let's see. Try to rephrase it. How does it help most large companies? I'm assuming they mean your partners.
Yep.
Drive traffic, direct traffic.
Yeah, I think what I talked about earlier about Criteo's DNA being this AI, this machine learning, this user level data that we're interpreting and using to make predictive outcomes. And what we've seen is, historically Criteo's focused mostly in the lower funnel. And over the past couple of years, we've extended our scope, specifically, in travel, to users who are earlier in that planning journey. And I think we've seen a lot of success building audiences that are primed and likely to travel in the next 30 days, or at least likely to book in the next 30 days. We do so a few ways, Darren, by looking at intent data that we have, behavioral data that a user exhibits on site, contextual data that we have access to through our supply partners, our direct supply partners that we have. And also, Criteo has a really large footprint in retail, so we can actually interpret shopping signals and use that to help make predictive outcomes for people looking to travel. So these are ways that we help the brands that we work with grow their audience base. And the really interesting part with that too is bringing them onto the site is one thing, but what are you doing to treat this user properly as they start to engage with different pages or different trips they might be interested in. So I think where we can really add value is that full funnel approach. So bringing them in, but also helping, get them closer to the booking.
Okay. Another audience member asks, how much of a role does historic customer behavior play in informing ad campaigns in today's environment? And should travel advertisers throw old habits out the window, or is there still useful data there? Either of you can answer that one.
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question? Sorry.
Sure. How much of a role does historic customer behavior play in informing ad campaigns in today's environment? Should travel advertisers throw old habits out the window, or is there still useful data there?
I think you need to recognize this as a completely different environment. There's for sure things like user friendliness. Of course, people wanting to go back for Christmas to see their families, people wanting to travel during summertime because there is nice weather. This is still happening. So that there is going to be an increased demand during these times. However, the way people are booking, particular different locations, whether it's now, that's going to be changing a lot. And particularly, based on kind of the lockdown measures. So it's important to look at, historically, what are the trends that are happening? But then it's really important to, partner, work with different partners, understand what's going on in the markets, what's happening real time, and look at different real-time analysis to see, okay, let's kind of focus on this because this is working, and make sure you stay agile. Because things are changing all the time. And I think the companies that are going to be the most successful are the ones that are going to be able to adapt to these different trends.
I'll just add one other thing to that, Darren, not being afraid to test, not being afraid to test and learn. So I think, there's certainly strategies. And look, we're talking about travel right now to also pre-vaccine, post-vaccine, when we all expect at least leisure travel to return to a similar level. I think we can see some of those strategies from before be applicable now. But just being nimble, like Pauline said, and being willing to test and learn.
Yeah. One big question that a few people have asked actually is about third-party cookie elimination, and how will Criteo be impacted by third-party cookie elimination?
Yeah, we're certainly working on it as a company. We've done a lot to bolster, talked about our identity graph, which is based on first-party data. We've got over 1 billion different identifiers, cross-device identifiers that make up that graph right now. And we're exploring other ways to sort of combat changes in the online ad tech space. So I think, a lot to come out soon. There's still also, there's still much left up in the air about what the future of our industry is going to look like. But I feel confident that, we have an amazing product team, and we've been able to innovate through all of the headwinds that have come across our business in the past few years, that, we're going to be ready with multiple options when the situation does sort of unfold.
So this next question is from another audience member about we've talked a lot about agility. This reminds me of the need to be agile that you've spoken to, Pauline. But with disruptions like last-minute border closures, new lockdowns on the horizon, how can travel companies keep up with this constant change? It seems like it's getting harder to trust automated systems when there's so many different unpredictable things happening. I kind of see what they're going for here.
Yeah, well, I think similarly kind of to my answer before, it's important to really see what are the users doing. Because what are your bookers doing? Are they booking more? Are they canceling more? And I think it's important to, look, this is what we've kind of worked with some different partners, is that we've kind of looked throughout all the different partners that we have. What are kind of the increases in bookings that we see? Where are the decreases? And based on that, we can make more informed decision, because what becomes really difficult is, of course, maybe some new regulations are put in, in UK, but then in US it's completely different. And then you have different ones in Scotland. And that changes all the time. And how do you keep up to that change? And there, it's best to use, we just produce these big reports in terms of analysis, and we actually have them posted on our website where you can see kind of in real time which markets are growing, which markets are decreasing. So at least kind of giving you some kind of real time and informed decisions about, where you should be pushing in terms of where people are looking in destinations.
Yeah. Are any of you seeing another question? Are you seeing any changes in device usage and or booking behaviors?
Definitely app. App is, sort of skyrocketed over the summer, and I think it's really easy, to understand that in a workplace, with everybody working from home or majority of people working from home, I know for sure I feel more comfortable pulling out my phone and looking at, different dream vacations and not worrying about my boss walking behind me and seeing what I'm doing. So I think you see a direct correlation with just the work from home culture and app activity going up. I know I was reading some stats earlier about through App Annie, just saying, there's been a 25% increase in year-over-year app traffic, and we're definitely seeing it reflective across our travel clients as well, both in terms of visitation, installs, as well as bookings.
And I think to add to Jason on the subject of app, we spoke about these last minute bookings, people making more quick bookings because, they don't have much time, as I did too, for my holidays in Puglia. I had 2 days to book everything. And actually, sometimes you might just go back to, a provider you trust, an app. It's so much quicker to do it on the app. So it kind of makes sense that, this app's usage is on the growth, right? Because this is a much kind of quicker way for you to kind of book where you want to go.
So one thing, I want to just step back and I have a question for you just to kind of end things on a more positive note. Not that this has all been very positive and it's been a great session.
We're very optimistic about the future of travel.
That's my question. Why are you optimistic about the future of travel, and how are you optimistic? In what ways?
Well, I mean, on my end, I'm optimistic because I believe everybody always wants to travel. And, I believe if there is demand for something, we clearly are going to, there's clearly people are going to continue booking and traveling. And therefore, even if this is a different environment and it's more difficult, I'm still going to go. I mean, this weekend, we've just decided to do a road trip and visit, a nice place in the UK, in Winchester. You're just discovering new places that you weren't, that you didn't know. So it's just new opportunities for travel companies to go for.
Yeah, and I'll say my take. I completely agree with what Pauline's saying as a traveler myself. From a online advertising perspective, I think it's just what we've seen through all this, Darren, is the collaboration between different media partners, vendors, brands, just this really strong camaraderie across the travel industry, I think will really benefit the industry as a whole for the future. That's something I'm really excited about. I think it's made a big difference in, sort of everyone's collective recovery through all this. And I know we're not out of this yet. We're certainly not. And we're constantly looking to evolve and see what's next. So I think just, that camaraderie that's been created through this has been really nice to see in an industry that historically has been more competitive than compatible.
Well, great. Thank you so much for being with us today. I think it's been a great session, and I hope you guys can go have lunch or dinner, in your case, Pauline. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Darren.